Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Landscapes. I hope you guys are well. I hope you're enjoying this little series. Thank you very much for watching and commenting. Now, I thought I'd jump in really quickly at the beginning of this episode just to say that a number of you guys have commented about maybe different edits you would do on previous episodes, which I really encourage. So thank you very much for that. But what I decided to do on the back of that was to make the video, or the image, sorry, for this week available as a download for you guys to edit it. So what I've done is I've posted a link in my YouTube community page and also on my Facebook page and set a deadline for you guys to do it. And some of you have, and so they will be coming up at the end of the video. So stick around to the end to see your edited versions of this image that's coming up today. Anyway, back to it.
So hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Landscapes, where I am still on Sharpenhoe clappers in Bedfordshire. So if you watched the last episode, you'll know that I was actually shooting this little avenue of trees behind me here, and I shot them as a panoramic because I needed the width. Now what I'm doing today is, instead of shooting as a panoramic down that way, I'm shooting literally, I've just turned around 180 degrees, I'm shooting straight down this way, but I'm going to shoot it as a single landscape image. And I'm actually going to try to shoot it in the aspect ratio that the camera gives me, which means I'm going to have to get everything right in terms of composition in camera. So I need to watch all of my edges, I need to make sure that everything's right, because I'm not going to allow myself to crop anything out here. So it's a bit of an exercise, this is, in getting everything right, getting the composition right in camera, as well as everything else as well. Now also, if you watched last time, you'll know that I was saying that we kind of like to read things from left to right, because we read our text from left to right. Now in this image, everything's going to be going from right to left. I haven't got the option on that because this is the composition that I want. So the trees are on the right this time and they're arching over to the left. So let's get set up and let's have a little look and see in camera how we can get the composition all set up so you can just do it without any cropping. So I set my composition up here, and the first thing that I've actually noticed is shooting at just around about 33 millimeters, is that because of where I am, this branch up here just above me is just impinging on the top of the shot, and because it's so close to the camera, it's going to be slightly out of focus, and also it's moving quite a lot, so you're probably going to get a little bit of a blurred, out of focus top part to this image. So I don't really want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the camera forward slightly and open up the focal length slightly, so somewhere around about 28, I don't know, something like that. We'll have a look when we get there, but just to eliminate this distraction here at the top. So let's do that now. So I've just moved forward just a couple of feet, that's all, and that's literally now eliminated this tree or this branch up here, and totally got rid of it. But as a consequence, I've had to come out ever so slightly to well, it's about 25-26 millimeters to compensate for that. Now a couple of things that I just wanted to discuss about this image. Firstly, let me just put record on so you can see what's going on. Now on the left hand side, or sorry, on the right hand side here with this tree, the trunk of this tree, I'm mindful here. So if I was shooting, probably this is where I was going to shoot originally, at around about 28 millimeters, 27 millimeters. You can see that there's no separation between the side of that tree and the edge of the frame. So I'm just going to pull it out ever so slightly so there's a little bit of separation. I'm not cropping in, so I've just remembered I said that. I was about to say I may crop in to see which one works, but I'm not going to crop in, so I need to make sure that it's right in camera here today. I'm going to keep it, I think, at that, because I quite like that little bit of blue behind. Now I will tone down that blue. I will definitely lighten it up a little bit so it's not quite so rich in post-processing. There's a lot of blue in the image actually, which I'll need to work on. Another thing is it's very windy today, so I'm having to shoot at a higher ISO. So my ISO is actually 640 at the moment to give me 125 or 1/125th of a second shutter speed, which should stop a lot of the motion hopefully. I might push that forward a bit more. I might go up to ISO 800 just to try and push it a bit more to really freeze it, because I don't want movement in these leaves, or I don't want a lot of movement in these leaves, and it's very, very windy, so I'm maybe getting quite a bit of movement if I don't push those shutter speeds up. And obviously with the exposure triangle, we know that if you push the shutter speed up, you're going to have to push the ISO up to compensate, or drop your f-stop down, and I don't want to go any further because I'm already on f11, and I'd like to keep as much of this in focus as I can. And the third thing that I just wanted to talk about really quickly was the use of a polarizer. Now, it hasn't rained here, it's quite a dry day, there's no real reflections, but the leaves still have that sheen on them that reflects sunlight. So just to show you here, I'm just going to turn this polarizer around, and that's not polarizing now, and you can see that the sky is a lot more washed out, which is fine actually, because I would quite like a bit more of a washed out sky, but you've lost all the vibrant colors in the leaves. So when I turn it back, you can see that that vibrancy really returns to those leaves, and also on the floor here, the woodland floor. So even though it's not wet, using a polarizer is still very beneficial in a woodland scene. Anyway, let's now get this back home onto the computer and do some processing with it.
So here we are back at the desk. What a lovely day that was, by the way, back in November. Absolutely gorgeous. The colours there were just fantastic. A little bit windy, but still very nice. Anyway, let's jump into the edit and see what I did. So as you can see here, this is the original raw file. Now it looks very dark, I appreciate that. And it was shot at 1/160th of a second ISO 800 in the end. I did discuss bumping up the ISO from 640, which I did. And it does look dark, but if I just switch on the clipping here on the darks, the shadows, you can see there's a couple of very small areas where it's clipping. You can see that's denoted by that sort of bluey purpley color, but not enough really to impact the overall image. So that's something I can deal with, and I should be able to pull out all the detail from the rest of this image. So this is the original raw file here. So here I've carried out some basic edits, and as you can see, it's pulled up the details really quite nicely. Obviously I've had to push the exposure up quite a bit to get those details in, but none of the blacks were really lost too much, the shadows, which isn't so bad. Now I've dropped the contrast right down, and I kind of like to do that with woodland, and I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. I know a lot of people like a punchier image, some people like a slightly darker image, but it's my preference currently, and that may change. That's what happens, I think, with photographers as we evolve. We change our styles, but at the moment I quite like this sort of very decontrasted, sort of less punchy, flatter image. So as you can see, that's what I've gone for. Again, if you want to pause and have a little look at the edits, they're over on the right hand side, but it's a very basic edit on this snapshot here. So the next edit is all around the presence area of the develop module, which is basically texture, clarity, dehaze, saturation and vibrance. And as you can see here, what I've done is I've pushed the texture right up, well not right up, but up to a reasonable level, and drop the clarity down. And what I feel that does is it gives me more of a softer feel. So if I'll reset these here and I'll just show you what I'm talking about. So I'll reset the texture and reset the clarity. Now, if I push the texture up alone, it gives you quite a sharp looking image. But if I now drop the clarity down, it sort of softens that off quite nicely. So yeah, so basically what I've done is just pushed up that texture and dropped that clarity to retain the details in the image, but give an overall softer feel. And then I've dropped the saturation and pushed up the vibrance. I just felt it was slightly too saturated at that point, and by dropping the saturation and leaving the vibrance, you end up with quite a desaturated image. But by pushing the vibrance up, you get quite a nice sort of balance between, well, it just basically gave me what I was looking for. Now, as I discussed when I was actually out taking the image, I didn't like the fact that the sky was so blue. This was caused by the polarizer, obviously, and I did discuss desaturating the sky, and that's what I've done in this next stage here. So you do that by coming over to the color mixer here, and you just select the saturation and just pull it back. So as you can see here, I've pulled the aqua and the blue and the purples and the magenta back. I'm not sure if the purple and magenta actually did anything, to be honest with you, but by pulling that blue back, if I push it up, you can see there the sky is becoming a lot bluer, a lot more saturated. So push those back to where they were, especially in these areas behind this tree on the right hand side. But by just dropping those back down, you're sort of losing that saturation, and that's more what I was looking for. I don't mind there being some sky in this image, but I don't want it to be too obviously blue and a bit jarring against the rest of the colours. And then for the final part of this stage of the editing process, I just wanted to bring up a little bit of contrast and a little bit of highlight onto the woodland floor here. So what I've done is I've just taken an adjustment brush and just painted it in. I've brought the exposure up, as you can see here with these sliders. I've brought the exposure and the contrast up. I've actually dropped the highlights because I've brought the exposure up, and I've pulled up the shadows, and then I've just warmed it up a little bit. So if I just give you a little bit of a before and after, you can see here that that's before those edits, and then that's after. And hopefully you can see there that's brought a little bit more life to the woodland floor. Now, following this, I then took it into Photoshop just because I wanted to remove some of the bright highlights on the tree trunks on the right hand side. So now we're in Photoshop, and we're just going to remove some of those offending highlights on the trees on the right hand side of the image. Now, you can imagine how difficult the conditions were when you think about it, that the raw image was so dark, and yet we still had those really bright highlights on the trees. But they're not difficult to remove in Photoshop. We just use a little bit of content aware fill. And as you can see here, here's the image prior to me making the adjustments. So you can see these very bright spots which I'm on about on the trees on the right hand side. And then if I just click on the layer where I've done the editing, you can see it was not a difficult process. It's quite a quick process just to select those areas and just hit a bit of content aware fill, and that removes them quite nicely. So now it's not quite so jarring when you look over that side, because obviously you haven't got those really majorly bright highlights there. And then what we'll do is we'll save that into Lightroom just to complete the final edits. So here we are in Lightroom. Let's finish off those edits and just get to the final image. So as you can see, here we are. This is the image saved back into Lightroom from Photoshop with the edits done to the tree. It's on the right hand side here. The next thing that I wanted to do was to just add a little bit of a radial filter and a vignette. So I've added a radial filter into the center of the image and lightened that up. So now your eyes are being dragged in. It's a technique that I use quite a lot with these woodland scenes. When I'm shooting woodland, I try to kind of find little clearings in the woods somewhere. So this one's an obvious one because it's a tunnel. But sometimes you have to look for them where there's a slightly lighter or darker area. And then I try and emphasize that in the edit. So here what I'm doing is I'm just brightening up that end of the tunnel there, so your eyes are being drawn into it, and I'm emphasizing that even more by darkening the outside with a little bit of a vignette. So hopefully you can see the difference there. So this is the image directly before that edit, and then when you just pull in that vignette and just lighten up that little area, it kind of, for me, brings the image to life a little bit. And then finally, and I think this is a really important lesson actually, I know that during the whole process of shooting the shot, I was like, no, I'm not going to crop it. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to shoot it in the aspect ratio that the camera gives me because it's a good exercise. But when I look at the image, I really feel like it needs to be cropped off at the bottom. So as you can see here, I feel that it needs to be cropped up to where this tree branch comes in on the left hand side. It's quite nice as it is, but I feel like the balance isn't quite right. So what I've actually done is I've cropped it in. I've cropped it up to just below the tree on the branch that drops down on the left hand side, and I feel that that's a much stronger image for me. I think the balance is better when it's cropped like this. So what I'm saying here is that you don't always have to follow your own rules. Do what you think is right for the image. Now, the one last thing that I think I'm going to do to this is just pull up the exposure a little bit, just a tiny little bit, just to brighten up that image a bit. And I feel like that is my final image. Well, as I said at the very beginning of this video, I hope you guys are enjoying this little series. I hope that you're getting something out of it. I want to say thank you very much for watching. But before we go, as I promised, let's have a look through some of your edited images. And they're coming up right now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.